Content note: this episode involves a real missing person case, a possible mental health crisis, and a person who has never been found. Please listen with care and be respectful if you choose to comment. It starts with a video. You click play, and there he is, just another traveler in a bright yellow t-shirt, rolling his suitcase through the sliding doors of an airport. He looks tired but normal. Backpack, carry-on, casual shorts. He could be anyone. A guy heading home from vacation, a coworker you might pass in the hallway, a friend's older brother on his way back from the beach. He walks into frame. And then, a few minutes later, he explodes back out of the same building in full sprint. No suitcase. No backpack. No passport. No phone. He bolts across the parking lot, climbs a fence topped with barbed wire, and runs into the fields beyond the runway, like someone being chased by something you can't see. In the footage, you never see whoever he thinks he's running from. You just see him. A real person with a name, a mother, a home, and a life that stops, right here, in a shaky airport camera clip that the internet has watched millions of times. His name is Lars Joachim Mittank. And after this moment, he has never been seen again. You're listening to Fear Files, Real Cases. Dark Details. Tonight, we're going to Bulgaria's Black Sea coast, to walk through the last known days of a 28-year-old man whose disappearance turned him into what people call the most famous missing person on YouTube. But behind the viral clip, there's a real family, a confusing trail of medical notes and hotel receipts, a string of phone calls home in the middle of the night, and a question no one's been able to answer. What was Lars running from? And why did no one ever see him come out on the other side? Before he became a mystery, Lars was just normal. Born in 1986, he grew up in northern Germany, near the town of Itzehoe. Friends describe him as quiet, kind of shy, a guy who liked football, his girlfriend, and his job at a power plant. After his father had a stroke, Lars helped his parents around the house. Nothing about his life screamed future internet legend. It was just steady, ordinary, and small. In the summer of 2014, his friends invited him on a beach vacation to Bulgaria, Golden Sands, a resort area on the Black Sea coast near Varna. Clubs, cheap drinks, loud music. It wasn't exactly his style, but he ended up taking the extra spot. Photos from the trip show Lars like you'd expect, on the beach, at bars, wearing a green SV Werder Bremen football shirt, blonde hair a little messy, a half smile on his face. They swam, drank, stayed out late. His friends later said he seemed fine, maybe not eating much, but nobody thought too hard about it. It was hot. Everybody's sleep schedule was upside down. On the night of July 5, 2014, they went out to watch a World Cup match at a bar. There was a small argument with some other German fans. Lars supported Werder Bremen, they supported Bayern Munich, but it fizzled out before it became a real fight. Nothing that screamed this is where everything goes wrong. But sometime after that night out, something did go wrong. By the next morning, Lars told his friends he'd been attacked on his way back to the hotel by a group of men he thought had been hired by those rival fans. He said they'd hit him in the head, and he complained of ear pain. No one else saw the attack. There's no police report. But whatever happened, a doctor in Bulgaria later confirmed he had a perforated eardrum and some jaw trauma. The vacation was almost over. The group was supposed to fly home on July 7th. At the clinic, a doctor told Lars it wasn't safe for him to fly with a ruptured eardrum. The change in pressure could cause permanent damage. He prescribed an antibiotic and suggested Lars stay behind for treatment. His friends didn't want to leave him, but Lars insisted they go. He said he'd be fine, that his travel insurance would cover his stay, that he'd catch a later flight. So they got on the plane back to Germany. And Lars, suddenly alone in a foreign country, checked into a cheap hotel in Varna called the Hotel Color, not far from the airport. That's where things started to unravel. We know what happened next because of scattered evidence, hotel staff statements, phone records, his mother's memory, and later investigations that tried to string it all together. From the moment he arrived at the hotel, the receptionist thought he seemed off, flushed, agitated, maybe drunk at first, until it became clear he was more than just tipsy. He bought water, he checked into his room, and he called his mother, Sandra, back in Germany. On that call, his voice wasn't calm and joking like it had been earlier in the trip. He sounded anxious. Suspicious. He told her he didn't trust the hospital doctor who treated him. He thought the staff were behaving strangely. He said the hotel itself felt weird, and he was convinced someone at the front desk had tried to copy his credit card. He asked her to cancel it immediately. From her home hundreds of miles away, Sandra listened to her son whisper into the phone like he was afraid someone was listening. He told her he thought people wanted to rob him. Maybe even kill him. He said he wanted to leave the hotel. She didn't know if he was overreacting, if he'd misread a situation in a place where he didn't speak the language, or if something was genuinely wrong. But she did what he asked. She had the card blocked, and she booked him a flight home from Varna for the next day, July 8th, as well as a backup overnight bus from Bulgaria back to Germany, just in case. She told him to rest. To get some sleep. He told her he planned to leave the hotel. He sounded scared. That was the last normal conversation they would ever have. A little after 1 a.m., Lars left the hotel color with his luggage. No one knows exactly where he went. Sometime around 2:30 in the morning, he called his mother again. This time he was whispering, terrified. He told her he'd left the hotel. He said 4 men were following him. He said he was hiding somewhere high up and was afraid he might fall. Then the line went dead. Shortly after that, he sent her text messages asking about his prescribed medication. Sil 500, what is it? He sent the question twice, like he was fixated on the pills, or suddenly unsure if the medicine was safe. Sandra didn't call him back right away. If he really was hiding from someone, she worried that his ringtone could give him away. So she sat by the phone and waited for him to call again. He never did. At dawn, a taxi driver and his passenger, a social worker, later reported seeing a young German man on the roadside near the beach, panicking and trying to flag down a ride. His pupils were dilated. He seemed terrified. They picked him up and drove him to Varna airport. It was Lars. He still had his luggage. He was dirty, as if he'd been hiding outside. But he'd made it to the one place his mother had told him to go, the airport, the gateway home. From here on, most of what we know comes from inside that building, and from the cameras watching him. Around 6 in the morning, Lars arrived at Varna airport. He called his mother and told her, with relief, that he'd arrived at the airport. Not I'm at the airport, but I arrived, like he'd reached a checkpoint he wasn't entirely sure he would make. He told her he was out of money now that his card was cancelled, so she arranged to send him cash through a transfer service. She told him again to see the airport doctor about his ear before boarding. He sounded tired, stressed, but still oriented enough to follow instructions. She reminded him of his flight in the backup bus, asked him to write things down. He told her they wouldn't let him take the plane or the bus. It was the last time they had a full conversation. At the airport, witnesses saw Lars ask a woman for directions to the medical office. Security cameras recorded him walking through the terminal, casually at first, in that yellow t-shirt, shorts, and sneakers, dragging his suitcase. He found the doctor, a man named Kostov. By the doctor's account, Lars was nervous and exhausted. He hadn't slept much. His ear still hurt, but medically, he looked fit enough to fly. Kostov checked him over, measured a slightly elevated temperature, gave him ear drops, and told him he could travel. There was paperwork to sign, basically saying he understood the risks of flying with an injured eardrum. It should have been a simple appointment. A final box to tick before going home. But in that small medical office, something shifted. According to later statements, Lars suddenly became unsettled, fixated on his medication, uneasy about the pills he'd been prescribed. The doctor said he seemed anxious, like someone on the edge of a panic attack. Then another person came into the office, a construction worker, according to some accounts, since renovations were going on at the airport. Whatever Lars saw in that moment, it pushed him over the edge. He stood up, shouted something like, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here," and bolted. He ran out of the examination room, down the hall, and out of the airport, leaving behind everything that usually defines you as a traveler and as a person in the system: his suitcase, his wallet, his phone, his passport, his ID. The only thing he took was his body and whatever was happening in his head. That's the part the camera caught. You've probably seen the clip. Lars leaves the terminal doors, slows for a second as he crosses the sidewalk, then breaks into a run again once he's past the glass windows. He cuts across the parking lot, climbs a fence topped with barbed wire, drops down on the other side, and disappears into a field near a nearby highway. Search dogs would later trace his scent through a patch of tall plants and out toward the road, where a few drivers reported seeing a young man walking along the shoulder, alone, that morning. After that, the trail goes cold. There is no footage of him coming back. No record of him boarding a bus, checking into another hotel, or walking into a police station. On paper, in every official system, he just stops. From Germany, All his mother had was a dead phone line and a news alert. When Lars didn't fly home, and when he didn't show up at the bus, police were notified. Local authorities searched the area around the airport. His family hired a private investigator. Hospitals were checked for unidentified patients. Fields and ditches were combed. His photo was pushed out through German and Bulgarian media. Nothing. In the months and years that followed, there were reported sightings: a hitchhiker in Bulgaria, a man seen walking along a road near a village, a possible match in Italy, another in Germany. Each time, hope flared up, and then died when the person turned out to be someone else. Online, the case exploded. The security footage hit YouTube and spread fast. People shared theories in comment sections and forums. True crime shows covered the story. Some called him the most famous missing person on YouTube, because his last moments before vanishing were captured so clearly, in broad daylight, and then replayed millions of times. That's the part of the story the internet loves, the mystery. The part where a man in a yellow shirt runs out of an airport and never comes back. But when you look underneath the viral clip, the case becomes something even harder to reckon with. Because this isn't a story of someone who slowly drifted away from their life over years, cutting off contact, planning a disappearance. This is a case where everything goes sideways over just a few days. The question is, why? There are three major categories of theories in Lars Mittank's case. The first, that he was the victim of foul play. In this version, Lars is either genuinely being followed by dangerous people, there's a real threat behind his paranoia, or he runs from the airport and later crosses paths with someone who takes advantage of his vulnerable state. People imagine traffickers, criminals, or opportunistic strangers in those fields beyond the fence and along the highway. There are problems with this theory. There's no hard evidence of anyone pursuing him in the terminal or on the footage. No eyewitnesses reporting a second person running after him. No signs of a struggle found in the areas that were searched. It's not impossible that something happened to him later, far away from the airport, but if there was a murder, there's been no body, no confession, no physical clue in more than a decade. The second theory, that this was a voluntary disappearance. In that scenario, Lars, under stress, frightened, maybe ashamed of something we don't know about, takes the opportunity to walk away from his old life and start over. He leaves his IDs, his phone, his money, everything that ties him to Germany, and vanishes by choice. But that theory crashes against what we know about him. He had a job he cared about, a girlfriend, a close relationship with his family. He had no history of wanting to disappear, no known criminal involvement, no secret debt anyone's ever found. You can fake a lot of things, but it's hard to fake years of being a stable, present son, and then go off the grid with no planning, in a country where you don't speak the language, with nothing in your pockets. That leaves the third category. The one that scares a lot of people the most, because it doesn't involve monsters in the dark or shadowy conspiracies. It involves your own mind. Lars had suffered head trauma and a perforated eardrum shortly before his behavior changed. Some doctors and researchers have pointed out that certain antibiotics, including the one he was reportedly prescribed, can, in rare cases, trigger severe psychiatric side effects, including paranoia, hallucinations, and psychosis. Other experts argue that since he may not have taken the full course of that medication, this is less likely. There's also the possibility of an undiagnosed mental health condition, like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, that just happened to surface far from home, under stress and fatigue, after a blow to the head. In many people, the first serious episode hits in their 20s, the exact age Lars was when he ran across that parking lot. If you look at the timeline through that lens, the pieces start to form a different picture. A young man goes on a trip and gets injured. He doesn't eat much. He has trouble sleeping. He starts to feel like something is wrong. He fixates on people around him, football fans, doctors, hotel staff. He becomes convinced they're laughing at him, plotting against him, copying his card. He calls home, not once but multiple times, saying people are following him, that 4 men are hunting him, that he's hiding somewhere high up and might fall. He becomes obsessed with the medication he's been prescribed, asking again and again what it is, whether it's safe, like he's afraid of poison. By the time he gets to the airport doctor, he's been awake for hours, maybe days, stewing in fear, far from home with no one he fully trusts in the room. Then a stranger walks in. And that's enough to tip him into full flight mode. From the outside, it looks dramatic and strange, like something from a horror movie. But inside his head, if he was in the grip of a psychotic break, it may have felt very simple. Stay and die, or run and live. If you believe that's what he was experiencing, then what you're watching on that grainy airport video isn't someone running from a real, physical attacker. You're watching someone running from his own brain. That explanation doesn't solve the core mystery: what happened after he disappeared beyond the cameras? If Lars was in a psychotic state, confused and afraid, he might have wandered into the countryside and died of exposure, dehydration, or an accident in a place that's never been found. He might have been struck by a vehicle on the highway and never identified. In rare scenarios, people in that state manage to survive, slipping into homelessness or adrift communities, living on the edges of society under new names or with no name at all. His mother holds on to that last possibility. She continues to share his photo, to work with police and investigators, to believe that somewhere, her son might still be alive, older, thinner, changed, but still out there, waiting to be recognized. For her, this isn't a mystery to obsess over. It's a missing person who hasn't come home. And that's the part that's easy to forget when you're 3 hours deep in online theories and slowed down CCTV clips. Every frame, every tiny behavioral detail people argue about, is still someone's child. Pause the airport footage in your mind. Go back to that first frame. A young man in a yellow t-shirt walks through the sliding doors, pulling his luggage behind him. He could be anyone. He could be you, or someone you love, just trying to get home. You know what's coming next. He doesn't. He thinks this is the place where everything is going to be okay, where a doctor will clear him and a plane will take him back to his own bed, his own city, his own life. Instead, something invisible snaps. And a minute later, he's gone. In the end, the story of Lars Mittank might not be about international conspiracies or dark secrets. It might be about how fragile the line really is between ordinary life and a nightmare you can't wake up from, especially when your brain, your injuries, your medication, and your environment all collide in exactly the wrong way, at exactly the wrong time. If you have any credible information about the disappearance of Lars Joachim Mittank, contact law enforcement or the appropriate authorities. Do not attempt to investigate on your own or harass anyone connected to this case. Real people vanish every year, on highways, in forests, in crowded cities and quiet villages. Some leave clues. Some don't. Some have their last moments captured on camera. Others just walk out the door and disappear into the dark. Fear Files is here to remember them. To follow the trail as far as it goes. And to remind you how thin the barrier can be between the life you know and one you never imagined. You've been listening to Fear Files, Real Cases. Dark Details. Lock your doors. Be kind to strangers. And if your brain is telling you something isn't right, don't ignore it. We will be back with another episode soon.